Yeah, I think moving Turner to the leadoff spot is probably the easiest thing to do, and he bats leadoff against lefties. That's uh, kind of been the way they've gone throughout the year. Bryson Stott hits leadoff against righties, which means Stott bats leadoff about 70% of the time, and he's just not getting on base right now. So maybe you drop him in the order. Turner, who is hitting, who is getting on base, maybe becomes the leadoff guy against everybody, at least for a little while here. And maybe that sparks things at the top of the order a little bit.
It's time for Sportsnaut's MLB podcast. Big League Buzz, news and interviews from around the majors. Here's your host, Scott Gulbransen.
Welcome back, everybody, to Big League Buzz, the MLB podcast from Sportsnaut. I'm Scott Gulbransen, and joining us today, a special guest, Scott Lauber. He covers the Phillies for the Philadelphia Inquirer. You can follow him on x.com at Scott Lauber. That's Lauber. Make sure you do that. If you want to know what's going on with the Phillies, this is the guy to watch. This is the guy to follow. This is the guy to interact with. And those Phillies, they've lost 9 of the last 10. They were just swept by the Pirates, something I never thought I would say in 2025, by the way. Yet they're only 4.5 games behind the Mets in the NL East. And so, Scott, I got to ask you, first of all, with Bryce Harper sidelined and the Phillies, they're hitting 198 in his absence. How are veterans like Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, how are they responding to the pressure? And are there signs they can really rally the lineup?
All good questions, Scott. Yeah, not a good weekend for the Phillies in Pittsburgh. First time in 10 years that they got swept in a series in Pittsburgh. So these are difficult times for them because, as you said, Bryce Harper's not riding to the rescue here. He's going to miss some time with this wrist injury that, look, he just missed 5 games with the bruised elbow and his wrist did not respond. If anything, it only worsened. So they're not sure when they're going to get him back. And in the meantime, they've got to figure out ways to kind of kickstart the offense. And you mentioned Kyle Schwarber. He had a terrific first 2 months of the season, not such a great last couple of weeks. But look, I mean, Kyle Schwarber is the least of their problems. They need other players to step up around Schwarber, and that means more power from Nick Castellanos. It means Alec Boehm's got to drive in runs. It means they need more middle of the order help from people like Max Kepler, who really hasn't produced much of anything for them out of left field. So, Bryson Stott has got to be a better player than he's been here lately. So they need some people to step up in Harper's absence. Right now, other than Trey Turner, who's piling up some hits at the top of the order, there isn't a whole lot of anything going on right now offensively for them.
Yeah, and it struck me, and we all know what a good young talent Paul Skenes is, but he really overwhelmed the Phillies. I mean, I think they got 2 hits in that game, right? What specific weaknesses in that offense and that approach, really the approach here, Scott, did he exploit? And how can they adjust? What did they learn from that experience going against elite pitching and that they can use against elite pitching moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, look, Paul Skenes makes a lot of teams look bad. So for me, I'm sitting there yesterday in Pittsburgh and I'm watching the game and I'm thinking, God, there could not be a worse time to have to face Paul Skenes if you're the Phillies, because you're struggling right now against everybody, not just Skenes. So in a sense, I think after the game yesterday, if everything was going the way it should and Paul Skenes did that yesterday, you'd shrug your shoulders and go, well, we lost to Paul Skenes. Everyone loses to Paul Skenes, or at least everyone has a hard time against Paul Skenes. The Pirates don't win much no matter who's pitching. So I think yesterday was kind of just, chalk it up to facing a great pitcher. However, the last week plus, as you said, has not been good for them. I think they've scored, less than 3 runs, now 2 runs or 1 run in like 4 of the last 5 games. So it's not a Paul Skenes problem. It's an everybody problem. And I think one of the things they need to do is use the field a little bit more. I think that there is probably a little bit of a natural, like, hey, Bryce Harper's not here. Everyone feels like they have to elevate their game a little bit. And I think maybe doing less will add up to more. I think there are a lot of guys right now who are trying to do a little bit too much. But I also think that, the Phillies kind of go through this now and then where the offense does kind of dip and they waste some good starting pitching. And, you look at right now, left field, center field, second base, and catcher. They're getting below average production at 4 positions on the field. And it's pretty tough to have a top 5 offense when 4 out of your 9 positions on the field are producing less than league average. So, I think it's incumbent upon the veteran guys, the Castellanoses, the JT Real Mutos, the Alec Bohms, to produce more in the middle of that order, and then some of the younger guys who are not so young anymore, like Brandon Marsh and Bryce Stott, to sort of take that next step that the Phillies have been waiting for them to take. And I think all of those things have to happen, and the offense gets clicking again without Bryce Harper.
Yeah, I know. Watching the fans too, the great fans in Philly, and how frustrated they are because you have this talented lineup, and that extends to pitching too. You had a great piece that I read on Jose Luzardo and about him possibly tipping his pitches. And these seem to be things that when a team is just going bad, Scott, all these things seem to pile up. And he's given up 20 runs in his past 2 starts. How easy is that to fix when you look at a guy as important as Jose Luzardo?
So, yeah, I mean, he'd given up, I think, 19 runs all year, and then he gives up 20 in his last 2 starts. And when that happens, I think you look at a few things. If you're a pitching coach or a pitching department, first thing you look at is, like, are there signs that maybe he's not healthy? Is the velocity down? Is the spin down? And they looked at all the stuff and they said, well, everything's consistent stuff-wise. He says he feels fine. It is worth noting that he's pitched more innings this year than he did all of last year, because he was hurt a lot of last year with the Marlins. But he says he feels fine, and all the stuff checks out to indicate that he's healthy. And so then you do a deeper dive and you say, well, is there something else we're not seeing? And I was talking to Luzardo yesterday, and he said, yeah, we think we found some things. He wasn't specific, but there were mechanical things that would indicate that maybe he was tipping his pitches. Now, was he? I mean, it's like a theory at this point. Like, they think they identified something that maybe the Blue Jays last week and the Brewers in the start before were picking up on him. It certainly looked like they knew what was coming based on how they hit him. So now he gets in the bullpen and he tries to fix it. And he said that's done through repetition. This happened to him in 2023 with the Marlins. He was doing something with his hands that were tipping off inadvertently, that was tipping off other teams as to maybe what was coming, and he was able to fix that. So you get in the bullpen, and this is what he was telling me, you kind of focus more on, like, fixing the problem, and then it becomes muscle memory, and then you're not thinking about fixing the problem anymore. So he said in theory it's an easy fix, but he was also realistic about, look, until I do it, I'm not going to have peace of mind that we've solved the problem yet.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. Now, Rob Thompson mentioned lineup tweaks, right? So when you're going through a stretch like this, that's always something to consider. You got to mix things up. And he talked about maybe moving Trey Turner to the leadoff spot against right-handers. How, in your view, how impactful could these changes be? And are there really other tactical shifts that the coaching staff might consider? Because they just got to spark the offense, as you've said throughout this entire interview.
Yeah, I think moving Turner to the leadoff spot is probably the easiest thing to do. And he bats leadoff against lefties. That's kind of been the way they've gone throughout the year. Bryce Stott hits leadoff against righties, which means Stott bats leadoff about 70% of the time. And he's just not getting on base right now. So maybe you drop him in the order. Turner, who is hitting, who is getting on base, maybe becomes the leadoff guy against everybody, at least for a little while here. And maybe that sparks things at the top of the order a little bit. Look, if you put Turner in the leadoff spot, maybe Schwarber behind him, now you've got your 2 best hitters without Bryce Harper batting 1-2, and maybe you have some bigger first innings. Or maybe, I think they need to have a big inning in order for everyone to just exhale a little bit and say, okay, we're back on track. And maybe the best way to do that is to just put your best 2 guys 1 and 2. But, there's only so much you can do beyond that. Like, so if you go Turner 1 and Schwarber 2, Alec Bohm is probably going to hit third in that scenario. Maybe Castellanos is going to hit cleanup in that scenario. And then the lineup kind of gets a little bit thin after that, unless you have people like JT Realmuto and Stott and Marsh and Kepler, who all of a sudden start to hit. So to a certain extent, your lineup is your lineup. But, I do think that there are maybe some shuffling that they can do at the top that can maybe help spark things.
Well, and we're in early June, right? Things can turn around very quick, and they can also get out of hand very quick. So you look now as we start talking, as I'm sure you are as well, the trade deadline coming up in July, and the Phillies, where they're at, they have roster gaps, or they could have roster gaps. They have outfield depth, maybe issues, some bullpen reliability. Do you see the prior? I mean, Dave Dombrowski, what do you think he's going to do here? Do you think he's going to target some big names here? How long does this team have to maybe turn things around before it's either big moves, or do you think it's going to be much more of kind of an under the radar moves to shake things up a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, look, until about a week or so ago, I would have told you I felt really, really strongly that their big deadline move would be for a reliever because I think that's really where the biggest weakness was their bullpen. They were, in my opinion, they were a reliever short going into the season because they elected to replace Jeff Hoffman and Carlos Estevez with only one pitcher, and that was Jordan Romano. So I kind of thought, independent of everything else, they were a reliever short. Then they lost Jose Alvarado to a PED suspension. He'll be back this season, but he won't be eligible for the postseason. And this is a team that's built for the postseason. So now they look like they're two relievers short. And so I thought, okay, well, clearly they'll address their bullpen. That'll be their big deadline move to make. And now you look around and you go, well, they look like they're at least a hitter short, even with Bryce Harper. If when he does come back, they look like, they're at least a hitter short in the outfield. And maybe it's a deadline similar to last year where they got a right-handed hitter like Austin Hayes, and they brought in a bullpen piece in Carlos Estevez. Well, I don't know. I mean, I look, it's clearly a team that's built to win now. And so if they continue to struggle, it's still only the beginning of June. The deadline's not until July 31st. You're not going to make a major shakeup kind of move, kind of trade on June 9th.
Nope.
But Dave Dombrowski's a pretty aggressive head of baseball operations. And, when he's in go for it mode, we know the kind of moves he's made in the past when he's in go for it mode. So can there be a blockbuster on the horizon before July 31st? Maybe so. He does have a prospect stable to trade from if he chooses to do that. Justin Crawford, Aiden Miller, Andrew Painter would appear to be off limits. Mick Abel has had a much better year this year and has pitched well in 2 big league starts now. So there are young players he could trade in a kind of a win now sort of trade if he gets into that mode. But there's a long way to go between now and July 31st. And so I think the next few weeks are going to be very important for them in terms of like what direction they choose.
Yeah, and that was going to be the last question I asked you was sort of when do you start to think, wow, this is getting desperate, or I shouldn't say desperate, but at least serious to the point where this team's going to have to do something to shake things up even more considerably. Like you said, is that a couple weeks? And then what does your gut tell you as that seasoned writer that you are covering the Phils? What do you think this team's going to do? What do you think happens with this team? Do they get out of this June, right the ship, or does it remain unknown to you? Do you think that, hey, who knows?
Tend to think that they're still going to be in it. I don't think they're going to fall out of it because I don't think their starting pitching is going to let them fall out of it. I mean, this is still a team that's got Zach Wheeler and Ranger Suarez and Christopher Sanchez and Jesus Luzardo and Aaron Nola is going to be back at some point and Andrew Painter's coming and Mick Abel's pitched well. So their starting pitching is really, really good. And I mean, look, even over the weekend in Pittsburgh where they didn't hit, they were in both of those games on Saturday and Sunday because Ranger Suarez was great on Saturday and Christopher Sanchez really kind of went toe to toe with Paul Skenes on Sunday. So I don't think their starting pitching is going to let them fall out of it. That said, I think that they really need to figure out ways to score runs without Bryce Harper for the time being, and then even when he does come back, they need to figure out ways to make their offense more consistent and more stable and just more reliable because you're going to lose games and waste good starting pitching if all you do is score 1 or 2 runs a game. So I think the next few weeks are going to be important for them, but I think that they're going to hang around at least in the wild card race because their starting pitching is too good to let them fall out of it.
Yeah, and like you said, and I said at the beginning of the show, it's only the beginning of June, right? So there's some time here, and that's why for my good friend Brian down in Florida, who's a big Philly fan, who's already freaking out, I'm like, dude, just relax. It's okay. We got some time. I understand why you're concerned, but yeah, with that pitching staff, and you just get a couple of those bats moving and going, and you up the scoring per game, and this team is right there. Again, a couple weeks ago, this was the hottest team in baseball. Everybody thought this was the number one team with all the power rankings out there. So it'll be interesting. And what we'll do, Scott, we'll try to check back with you after the All-Star break, but we certainly appreciate the time. Make sure you follow Scott on x.com at Scott Lauber, Lauber. Scott, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, there you go. Scott Lauber, the guy who covers this Philadelphia Phillies team every day, one of the best in the business there at the Philly Inquirer. Thanks to him for getting us up to speed. And this team, I think he hit it on it. It's June. So now, I'm not saying Rocky fans shouldn't be hurting right now, but Philly fans, I know you love your team. You're the most intense fans there are probably in all of sports when it comes to baseball and others. But this team, yeah, you got to be concerned, the injuries, the lack of production at the plate, as Scott mentioned, but you just got to think that this team's going to turn it around. I mean, there's just too much talent there. And if it doesn't, that's the point he mentioned too about Dave Dombrowski, the GM of the Phillies, is that he's very aggressive. And when he's made trades in the past, they've always worked out pretty dang good for the Phillies, who've gone on to do well in the playoffs. And this team is built to make a run at the World Series. That's what they're built to do. If you look at that staff, you look at the moves they made last offseason. So this guy thinks the Phillies will be there. And I think, and this is nothing against the Mets, but I just think that the Phillies, if they get going on all cylinders, especially near the All-Star break and carry that over into the second half, I think it's the Mets and the Phillies. I just think it's going to be those two teams, and we'll see who can be more consistent, especially at the plate, because Phillies got the edge on the mound. And I think that's what happens here. So if they can fill some of those roster gaps, maybe another outfielder, maybe another bat, definitely bullpen again, as well as we saw last year. And as Scott mentioned, he thought too that they would probably be doing that this season as well. And you as soon as you get past the All-Star break before the trade deadline, you have these teams who have good relief pitching and they're 25 games out and their season's over and they're looking to get a return on those. So that's what I would look for Philadelphia to do. What do you think? You tell us, Philadelphia Philly fans, down below in the comments or on our social media handles, which you can also follow below, all linked in the description or on the video. Make sure you tell us what you think. What do they need to do? What changes would you like to see the Philadelphia Phillies make? And if you're a Mets fan, tell me how much you hate the Phillies. No, I'm just kidding. Keep it positive down there. But anyway, tell us what you think. We always want to know. Do us a favor. Make sure you follow the channel. If you're watching us, hit that thumbs up. Also the subscribe button and the notifications bell. If you're listening to us, thanks for listening to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review Big League Buzz. We certainly appreciate that from everybody out there. Until next time, this is Scott Branson of Sports Not. This has been Big League Buzz. And don't forget, keep swinging for the fences.